Hi everyone, welcome back to the Code Bakery, and today we're going to be kickstarting our React series. Now, what is React? An important thing to do whenever we're looking to start learning a new technology is to always go to the documentation page. So as you can see, I'm on react.js.org, and it's very simple. React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Essentially, there are a couple of things that make React unique. One is that it's component based. And so if you look at this website, you can see that there are different parts of this website. For example, there's the nav bar, there's the main section here, and then there is all of this information here. Each each part of this website is a component, essentially meaning that you can write you can write different parts of your website in different files and then combine them in React. What this allows you to do is, let's say you have a lot of files that you reuse like throughout a multi-page website. It allows you to be a lot more efficient and you don't have to copy paste code. Furthermore, you're also given components in React, essentially meaning that you can have parent elements and child elements and pass data in between them. This turns out to be really useful. Obviously, this is like a high level overview before we get started into doing like our own React app, but everything will make sense once we start coding. All right. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through the components section of React, and we're also going to be setting up a project. Today, we're not going to be doing that much of a functionality just because React is such a new concept. So we're just going to be going through setting up the project and talking about some features of React. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install Node.js. And so essentially, what Node.js is Node.js is a library that's going to enable us to download React. So um, if you haven't installed Node.js yet, all you have to do is go to nodejs.org and then install the current or install anything that's above Node 5.2. If you have Node above 5.2, then you're able to work with React and everything's fine. But I'd highly recommend just go to nodejs.org and install the latest version. So once you have the latest version installed, what you want to do is you want to come back to Visual Studio Code and you want to open up the terminal. You can do that through Control squiggly line. It's the button under Escape. And so now what we want to write is npx create React app, and then we can call it anything we want, like Code Bakery React project. So let's look at what this line of code is going to do. npx is something that comes installed with Node. And so when you install Node, you also install npx. Create React app is basically an application that was created along with React to help people learning React just quickly get started in using React. So Create React app is a really useful tool that you're going to want to use a lot in the future, just because it essentially sets up your project for you and makes everything really quick and efficient. The final part is whatever name we wanted to make our project. So I could have done npx create React app React project instead of cb React project. It's anything you want, really. So those are three parts of our command, and right now we just have to wait for it to set up and install. And as you can see, it's installing React, React DOM, React scripts, etc., etc. So once we see this is set up, we're able to run it and quickly get started into an efficient and an efficient workspace, essentially. All right, once the installation process is done, you should be able to see this screen. And so essentially it says success, created your project in this area. To start, here are a couple of commands you can do. And for right now, the one we want to use is yarn start. So let's type yarn start, and then, all right, so this is actually good. So basically the reason that we had this error is because we haven't gone into our project yet. As you can see, the project is in CB React project, but we're not in there in our terminal. So we have to do CD into the React project, and then we should be able to do yarn start. So as you can see, it's working now, and that's something that's just good to watch out for and make sure like you don't have that error. So that sounds good. Basically, what's happening now is create React project essentially creates a default project for us, and we're just essentially doing yarn start to run our program and see what they've default created for us. So as you can see, it's showing starting the development server, and what we can do actually is let's go to Google Chrome. It should open up Google Chrome for you guys, and so let's go back to our Node application. And what we can do, as you can see, it's opened up on localhost 3000, and then it says loading. But essentially, what's going to pop up slowly but surely, essentially what's going to pop up is it's going to say running on localhost 3000. And because it's running, so there, it says compiled successfully, you can now view CB React project in the browser. So essentially what's happening is because it's on localhost, what we're able to do is, so this is the default project that Create React app gives us. And so essentially it's just the logo of React, learn React, which is just a link to React.js, and then edit app.source and save to reload. So let's, we're in CB React project. Let's go through um, everything that we see here. So the first part is the node modules. And essentially, as developers ourselves, we don't really want to go into the node module section just because what that means is a major benefit of React is that there are a lot of developers creating tools that can help you better utilize React and help you create like better websites with it. And so all of those tools that you import from the internet or anything like that would live inside node modules. And so because we're essentially just like using other people's code, we import those things in we import those modules in the node module section, and that's why we won't really want to use them. The next folder is called public, and essentially we as developers we don't really want to use this either, but let's just go through the node modules. As you can see, there are a bunch of different modules here, and we don't really want to go through any of those, but let's go through public. So as you can see, there are a lot of files inside public. So the first file we have is a default file that just comes along with create React app, and that's the React logo. So we don't really need that, but in public, the only thing that we should, excuse me, in public, the only thing that we should really be focusing on is this index.html file. So this is the index.html file that we see in our React app. And so essentially what happens is in React, we only make one call to a server. For example, when we went to node.js.org, our browser made a call to that node server, and then the node server sent us HTML and CSS back that developed our page. In React, that only happens one time, meaning that you're able to build applications relatively efficiently, and because it all compiles at one time, you're able to do like a lot of things that like save computing power, and also a lot of things that like enhance the experience of the user. So essentially what happens is because we only make one call, um, what we do is we only render one HTML file, and then we just update that file with different types of code. So as you can see in Create React App, we only have one React file, and for example, React App. Let's just make sure that we're able to change what's happening. So let's change this to Code Bakery. Save, and then as you can see, the title is now Code Bakery. So this is essentially, you don't need to do too much, but all you know is that this is the file that React renders. This is the one HTML file that React renders, and then also if we take a look here, we see div with an ID of root. This is important, so remember this, and we'll come back to this really soon. So that's pretty much all we need to do in the public file. And now let's go to the source folder. So essentially, this is where 99.9% of our code is going to be. What happens right here is we have some JS files that are pretty notable. So the first one is app.js, and then the next one you could probably see is app.test, but just for most use cases, you don't need these types of files, so we can just delete those. and as long as we don't import them, so here are a couple of our files. So we have index.js and app.js. Everything else is relatively useless for right now. So let's try and delete them. So we can delete this and then delete this. Now something that's important is we want to make sure that we don't get any errors, and that's because we're trying to import webvitals.js, but we just deleted that. So what we have to do, so you have to delete this and then delete this, and then that's good. It's still able to run. So essentially what's happening here is if you see document.getElement by ID root. Now let's go back to our index.html file and we see that same div here. So essentially what this index element is doing is it's taking the code from the source file that we wrote and putting it into the index.html file. So what we see in the index.html file is that it renders app and it says import app from app. And then if we go to our app.js file, we're able to see the HTML that is rendered in app, essentially. So app is a component that we call in index, and then we take the code from app and we put it inside this div root element. So you can see some more about what I'm talking about if we inspect element. So let's go to inspect element, and then let's scroll down. We see div ID root, and then we also see class is equal to app, and that is coming from this file right here. So that is just a little bit about setting up the React project, and now let's delete this code and start some of our own code to talk about React and its features. Alright, so deleting this code is pretty simple. All we're going to need to do is just delete that and then do an h1 saying like, hi, this is a React tutorial, right? So let's save that. It should update, and don't focus on the warnings. But for example, in here, what happens is we are importing an image that we don't use, so it's going to give us a warning. So we can save that. We can see compiled successfully, and then let's reload. Essentially, there we go. We see hi, this is a React tutorial. So something that I mentioned previously about something that's very important about React is that it's component based. So let's try and build a set of components and see how that runs in React. So each component essentially is a file. So let's do a new file, and we want to call this file text.js. And so what we want to do is the first part in creating any React file is we want to get the essential boilerplate down. So for right now, all we need to do is import React from React. And then what we're able to do, or we don't even need this. So essentially what we have to do is we have to make sure our main function is the same as what we named our file. We have function text and then export default text. And so what we can do now, let's just make sure import React from React. Okay, yeah, so this is actually important. So what you need to do is, now that you have this file, we can essentially just copy this file over and do it to text. So import React from React, and then we're going to have a function. And essentially, this function, something that's important about learning React, is the concept of JSX. And so essentially what JSX is it's very similar to JavaScript. JSX stands for JavaScript scripting language, I think. Let me just double check that. So JSX is essentially just a syntax version. It's like an extension of JavaScript. And so essentially what you're able to do is JSX composes like this. You have a function, and then you need to return a certain value. So return parentheses, parentheses, and then inside this return statement, you're allowed to write a lot of HTML, and also you're able to call files from JavaScript as well. So essentially what you're able to do, and what we want to do is we want to create a component. So let's go back to React, and you can see that there are multiple components, But one thing we want to do is let's create a component called text. Okay, and essentially what this component is going to do is it's going to say hi name. And so this name is going to be supplied by another file. And so that's the real advantage of components, is that you can pass data through different files, and that really improves the functionality of your website. But how do we do that? We do that with something called props. So essentially, the first thing we have to do is we have to import text in app.js. We're going to import text from /text. And then what we can do is once we've imported it in the start of our file, we can actually render text as a component. And that's very important. So as you can see, this is green, right? And this is green, which is important. And then obviously, let's look at our error. JS expressions must have one parent element. So let's run props here. And so props is going to be useful in order to pass data through. And so once we do function text props, we're able to pass a value called, let's say, name equals Aryan. And so essentially what we can do is we can actually just delete this. And now that we've passed name equals Aryan, what happens is when we render text, if we do props.name, let's go here, props.name, let's just save this and save this. What we can see happens is it says hi Aryan. So as you guys can see, essentially what happened is we passed data from app into a separate file. And that really goes to show like just how useful React can be. So just to recap, what we did today is we essentially just created our React project, set it up, went through what makes a React project, and then talked a little bit about components and how you can pass data through files. Next week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking more about the features of React and something called React hooks. And it's if you didn't understand that much, don't worry, just because we're at the very beginning. And as we work on more applications and we actually code it up, you're going to be able to understand a lot more. If you want to explore the topic in like outside of Codebakery tutorials, I highly recommend the React documents. And essentially, what they do is they show a lot about React and the main concepts, guides, etc., etc. So it's a really good resource that I highly check out. You recommend. So that's it for today. Thank you for coming to our Codebakery tutorial, and we'll see you next week.